Hi everyone, it's Ross Anderson here from the Australian and New Zealand Boutique Wine Show with episode number 8 of Meet the Boutique Winemakers. And of course, keeping in the tradition of the last few episodes, this is the trophy edition. As many of you are aware, we ran the Australian and New Zealand Boutique Wine Show for 2020, ran about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. And given the challenges of this year, we pulled off more than 900 entries and had a great set of results. So we're thrilled with the outcome. The ANZ Boutique Wine Show is celebrating 25 years of supporting the small winemakers of Australia and New Zealand. And our aim with these interviews, as always, is to inform, entertain, and educate you on all things boutique and share the stories and the personalities behind the brands, which are the heartbeat of Australian and New Zealand wine. Now, on to our interview this morning. The Adelaide Hills region of South Australia is producing consistently great wine. Today's interview is a merger between two families with long connections to beverage making and viticulture and horticulture. For the past 20 years, the Pike and Joyce families have worked together on their brand, Pike and Joyce, to huge success. This is the second year in a row that Pike and Joyce have achieved trophy success at the ANZ Boutique Wine Show. And to explore this further, I'm joined by senior winemaker Andrew Kenny in Adelaide this morning. And we're just going to patch him in. Morning, Andrew. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Ross.
Welcome. You were saying it's going to be a scorcher in Adelaide today, or in your area. What are you going to hit today?
Yeah, no, the mercury's hitting 40 today, so we're all sitting in the cellar, keeping cold, and got the beers on ice. So,
is that beers for breakfast?
Yeah, absolutely. 11 o'clock, we're done.
11 o'clock, you're done. So, and is it going to be a scorcher the weekend as well? You got hot Saturday, hot Sunday?
Yeah, we got 40.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. You're back. There you go. You're back. Sorry, you're saying you've got 40.
Yeah, so we've got 40 degrees tomorrow with hot northerlies coming in. So.
And so, while we're on that, what happens in the vine? In the vineyard. Are you going to do anything, or you just?
Well, we've had so much rain this year that it's actually probably good to slow down the growth a little bit. So we're not too worried. I think this year we'll end up actually leaf plucking and trying to open the canopies a little bit more and get some sunlight in.
And so, with lockdown, how did that impact your operation? And just to clarify, Pike and Joyce cellar door and vineyards are in Adelaide Hills, but the wine is made up in the Clare at Polish Hill.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So
and that's where you are this morning.
Yep. So I'm up in Clare. I live just outside of Polish Hill, and originally from the Adelaide Hills. We pick everything there, bring it up, and I guess in terms of lockdown, we just got everything off ullage. We made sure everything looked sound, and we just went home for a couple of days. But when the original lockdown hit back during vintage, we ended up having to we take about 8 international winemakers, and we ended up just telling them all to go home one day.
And so what impact did that have on the operation? You still got the job done? It just put a lot of pressure on the domestic crew? Or?
Yeah, pretty much. We got a really competent team here, so we sort of just all knuckled down and got it all done, got everything in tank and ready to go. Ordered all our dry goods so that we weren't going to be left without bottles.
And so I guess this may not be that easy for you to answer, but maybe you can answer it from a general perspective. Do you feel consumer confidence is starting to return?
Yeah, I do. I guess the issue was that people didn't really want to come to Cellar Door, and being a small brand, majority of our sales are through Cellar Door. So that was the impact, and also through our restaurant on site. And we've got a lot of really small batches, so they're not out in national retail. But I think now, with the excuse of last week, now people are a bit keener to get out and about. But
great pizza debacle, eh?
Yeah, exactly. No one's eating pizza anymore. But, I think people are out and about, and I think we started a couple online campaigns at the same time, had a few flash sales, and that sort of helped us push things along when we were losing a little bit of track in the restaurant.
That operation in your restaurant looks spectacular, and that would have been impacted, but hopefully back up on its feet. But let's talk about the accolade. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. Actually, no, I'm going to show the bottle first. Pike and Joyce, here it is, the Sauvignon Blanc 2020, taking out trophy yet again. So you did this last year, and you also took out the Gruner last year, and so back-to-back trophies for Sauvignon Blanc from Adelaide Hills. So big congrats to you and Steve and the crew. I'm going to pop it up on the screen now. Do you remember anything specifically related to the vintage and growing conditions around this 2020 that has popped it up yet again?
Yeah, well, I guess just in the winery for the last 2 years, 19 and 20, when we were processing the Sauvignon Blanc, you could smell it. Like even as grapes, you could smell that it was Sauvignon Blanc. It was a really varietal, like pink grapefruit and lemongrass, and that went through for the entire fermentation. So I think that's why these wines have been picking up accolades like that. I guess in terms of the vintage conditions, we were a bit stressed. We obviously had bushfires, and we came out of that unscathed, really luckily. And then we also had that really dry December, but we had about 60 mil in January of rain, and that we then had a beautiful ripening period all the way through to harvest, and I think that compounded with those cooler nights, I guess sort of similar to 19 in that ripening period.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Adelaide Hills as a region is starting to really pop up in front of mind when you think of Australian Sauvignon Blanc. When did you think this started coming to the fore?
I guess Adelaide Hills, I think when people were all planning, so, the 90s and leading up to the early 2000s, people like Jeff Weaver and Shaun Smith, and they were really at the forefront of Sauvignon Blanc. And I think the Sauvignon Blanc styles that you see out of the Adelaide Hills, they're not that really kiwi fruit and pyrazines and green. They're more in that pink grapefruit spectrum, a little bit more tropical and some obvious fruit without being cloyingly sweet or anything. And I think, probably about 15 years ago, really hit our straps and started getting to the forefront of Australian Sauvignon Blanc.
Andrew, tell us a little bit about you, your story, your journey in wine. What's the go with you?
So grew up, born and raised in the Adelaide Hills. So grew up in Nairn, which is about 15 minutes east of the Lenswood Valley, where this wine comes from. Went to Europe when I was about 19, did a bit of stuff in Italy and decided that I wanted to get into wine. So once I came back, I went back to uni, even though I didn't enjoy school at all. Loved the uni life. And
you were at Adelaide Uni?
Adelaide Uni, yep. Studying at Waite campus. Graduated in 2013, and end of 2013 I came up to Polish Hill, and been here ever since, and done a few trips back to Europe, made a few wines in Germany in the Pfalz wine region, which is another cool climate region, really known for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, which has sort of, I guess, helped me develop different styles in terms of cool climate winemaking. And yeah, so here I am today.
And what do you like working with? What variety do you enjoy the most, and what challenges you the most?
I think Pinot Noir for me is probably the most challenging, because it's like a schizophrenic grape variety. It's so all over the place, and you can have so many different characteristics from one single clone, and then of course you go into the clones, and there's just a myriad of flavors that you can get. So that one's a a challenging one, but it's also really fun. And then working with Chardonnay is probably my go-to. Really enjoy it. It's almost, a bit of a blank canvas, and you can really imprint a winemaker's hand on it, I think.
And so with the Pike and Joyce stable of wines, do you have a hand in making all of them?
Yeah. So we're pretty conscious of the whole team being involved from grape to glass, rather than sort of splitting it up in you do this variety, you do this variety. So we've got a cellar hand and 4 winemakers at the moment, and we sort of get everyone in on classification, and everyone. We sort of want everyone to know how to do everything, so across the whole portfolio.
And your future aspirations? Do you see yourself making your own label or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I've bought a vineyard in Auburn, where my house is, as this year, and I started making Riesling in 2016 from Clare. So I've made a Pinot Noir from the Lenswood Vineyard in 2020. So I've got, as of next year, I have 2 wines coming out, just under the Kenny wine label.
Fantastic. Excellent. We'll look out for that. Let's have a look at, I want to explore the Pike and Joyce union a bit. It's unique and it's very strong. The Pike family is steeped in history with beer brewing and all kinds of things, and then getting into the wine side of beverage. And the Joyce family, 5 generations, 100+ years of horticulture and viticulture in the Adelaide Hills, so an intimate knowledge of the area. Do you know much about this history, and can you tell us a bit about how the partnership formed?
Yeah, well, I guess Andrew and Kathy Pike are cousins with the Joyces. So Kathy is sort of the bridge between the Joyce and the Pike family, and Joyce's found a vineyard or a property in Lenswood that had apples and cherries on it back in 1998, I think, and they sort of looked at it, and it was just too steep for cherries and apples. They couldn't really work it, so they sort of went, said to Andrew and Neil and Edgar Pike, and said, do you want to put some grapes here? We'd like to get involved in the wine game, and that's sort of how it came about. And I guess ever since they've been slowly expanding on that, and with the restaurant coming in and the cellar door coming in, and the vineyard's sort of been constantly growing as we buy bits and pieces around the cellar door.
Yeah. And you make so you got Sav, Gruner, Chard, Pinot, Shiraz. What else are you doing? You got some sparklings?
We've got a couple sparklings. So we've got 100% Pinot Noir Rosé, Blanc de Noir, and then we have a 100% Method Traditional. Normally sits on lees for about 5 years in bottle, and that's in that traditional champagne method, and that's generally it's about a 60% Pinot Chardonnay blend, and then we have I think it might be 20 odd varieties.
And we're going to talk about that in a sec when we get to the alternative, right? I'm interested in finding out a little bit about what's actually happening on the property as opposed to the main line. So what else is in the think tank? But I guess we'll talk about that in a sec. So the highlights reel of, and I know you've only been there for 7 years, 8 years.
Yeah,
would have been.
Yeah,
roughly?
7 years now. Yeah.
Do you know much about the highlights reel of the Pike and Joyce since established? And I guess the biggest challenges they faced.
Well, I guess, probably the biggest challenge has been the last 2 years with I guess, poor fruit set and dry conditions, and then having that bushfire come through, which, once again, we were really lucky not to get affected. But, a lot of our neighbours did, and I guess it's just not a great thing for the region. But I guess highlights would have to be expanding on constantly growing new varieties that we'll talk about later, other things like Gamay and Nebbiolo. The cellar door being another highlight, being able to put that one through, and then opening the restaurant. In terms of the wines, I think the Chardonnay has been the top highlight for me since I came on board. I think it's just such a beautiful producing vineyard that, you know, it makes it easy year in, year out to make a really nice wine out of.
So while we're talking Chardonnay, let's have a quick look. So you've got the K Chardonnay and the Sirocco, and both medalled as well. You've told us it's your favourite. Tell us a little bit about the wines. Like, if you were behind the counter at the cellar door pouring this into a punter's glass, how would you describe the differences between the two?
Yeah, well, I guess the K is our barrel selection. So we just go through, we taste all the best barrels. They go into the K, and then the second tier is that Sirocco label. So the K, I think, is a little bit more flinty, and looking at it in the glass, it's got that beautiful white peach, but it's quite elegant. And then that struck match flint and that hazelnut finish sort of rounds it out. And there's a nice lick of French oak in there as well, which sort of just provides that tightness through the mid palate.
Fantastic. And whilst we're talking about the white wines, let's look at this bad boy who picked up a trophy last year. This is the Gruner. So what's the story with these Austrian varieties and your site?
Yeah, well, I think Austria being a cool climate region, and Gruner obviously doing really well over there. I think it was Hundorf Hill brought a bunch in, and we all sort of the region sort of jumped on it and started making these wines, and they are really different across the entire Adelaide Hills region. So in Lenswood, in our Lenswood sub-region, it's more of an acid-driven wine with a slightly, I guess, silky textural focus, and I think that they just perform really well in Adelaide Hills, and I think we're going to keep pushing that variety as a region to sort of, I guess, get up there past sort of Pinot Gris. Everyone seems to be making really successful wines out of it.
Yeah. I was doing some. I was talking to Larry yesterday from Hundorf Hill, and he was talking about the whole Gruner story and how it came about and the differences, because they make 4 different styles of Gruner: dessert, a classical, a reserve, and a new world, as he called it. And he was just explaining all the differences, and he's passionate about the Austrian varieties. And I guess I was quite surprised to find out that is it more than 30 producers are now making Gruners in Adelaide Hills. So becoming something of a bit of a stamp of Adelaide Hills, which is great.
Yeah,
and the wine's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about a typical day for you. I mean, and let's talk about maybe harvest day. The grapes are harvested in Adelaide Hills at, I guess, real early when it's cool. And what happens then? Trucked up to the Clare?
Yeah. So I guess the weeks leading up to it, we're constantly getting the vineyard guys. We've got an amazing team in the vineyard, headed by Chris Coulter. Yep, there you go. And it is extremely steep, so you got to be pretty fit to be walking up and down there, which Chris is. And we, leading up to vintage, to a couple of weeks prior to picking, we get samples constantly taken, where we're just checking for fruit flavour. And then on the day where we've decided to pick, they'll go through, hand pick everything, put it into small 400 kilo bins. Those bins are then put into the apple storage in Lenswood, because the Joyces have obviously the apple orchards. So we chill it down overnight there, and then they're brought to us first thing the next morning. So I guess as an example, with the Sauvignon Blanc, we might receive that at 6:30 in the morning. the grapes are completely chilled, and we then start crushing and processing it. We press it off skins relatively quickly, don't do any free run or pressing cuts, and then ferment it sort of within a couple of days.
What's the general turnaround from receiving to fermenting? Is it 24, 48 hours? Is it slightly more?
Yeah, it's probably closer to 48 hours. We let it settle overnight and then check the I guess clarity of the juice, and then we might let it settle for another day. But I guess just using Sauvignon Blanc as an example, it's okay to have a little bit of that haziness in the juice, because it actually does help with fermentation, provides a little bit of that silkiness on the palate.
And so I'm interested in this Adelaide Hills region. I'm going to pop the map up just so we can see where we're talking. So we've got Adelaide on the left, Pike and Joyce sort of in the middle with the blue pin. What is it about this Adelaide Hills region that grows such premium quality fruit? And it's consistently, is it a factor of the landscape, the terroir, the soils? It was a combination of everything.
I think it's the GI itself is just one of the biggest in Australia, and it's that diversity across the entire region. It stretches from 350 meters altitude all the way up to 710, I think, up at Mount Lofty summit. So we're sitting at about 590 altitude. On top of that, there's just that amazing array of different soil types across, because it is such a big GI. We can have those varieties that are planted to better soil types. So I think that plays a big part. And then, of course, with the rainfall, we get a lot of rainfall, and with that, we don't have to irrigate as much, and the vines generally are a lot healthier and have those beautiful green canopies, and that helps us with consistency, I think. So if it is a warmer year, the vines are actually helping protect the fruit. If it's a cooler year, we can go through and start picking off bits and pieces of leaf matter and get a little bit of sunlight in to help with disease pressure and that sort of thing.
And so from your perspective, you're based up in Clare, but with the vineyard management, do you come down to Adelaide Hills and get involved on the property?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess Steve, the chief winemaker, he's really focused on getting everything right in the vineyard, because you've got to get it right in the vineyard to make a nice wine. So we always go out and have a look and put our 2 cents in, and then we're actually going to go out and start doing some different pruning techniques this year on some Pinot Noir. So sort of Scott Henry trellis, where it's a 4 cane system, where grapes hang down there and then hang down there. We go out there and play around a bit.
And so you'll and away from the beers, did you say you're going to go and trial this, or you're going to start implementing it in certain areas? And what's the benefit of that?
We'll trial it. I think it's just to open up the canopy, so that way we can grow a little bit more fruit without shading. If you have bunch on bunch on bunch, you're not going to get an even crop load. You're going to get some that are quite ripe and some that are unripe. But we're hoping with this method we can sort of get an even canopy and an even crop load, and everything comes out consistent. So it'll just be a trial for this year.
Question then, and it's sort of related to both families. You've got a great setup in Adelaide Hills, and you've got the Pike setup in Clare, and you've got 4 winemakers. So how does that work at vintage time? Isn't that a bit frantic if you've got all the Pike vineyards coming online, and you've got all of the Adelaide Hills coming online as well? How do you keep the batches separate, and how do you manage all that workload?
Well, we take in as I alluded to earlier, we take in 8 to 10 international guys. This year, most of them are all from Australia. But so they help us with logistics, but we generally pick Adelaide Hills a bit later. So a lot of the Riesling's probably our busiest time. So we work 24 hours. We pick Riesling at night, and then we might have the Adelaide Hills stuff start coming in at the end of the Riesling pick. So that sort of alleviates some pressure. I guess we're just really careful with keeping everything separate and fermenting everything separate, and that way we can make blends with sort of spreading our eggs. So, if one ferment doesn't work out, we've got another ferment rather than putting everything together at once.
And storage capacity with that much volume coming through, is that up? I'm assuming that's up in the Clare as well.
Yeah. So we've got a couple chilled containers that if we are struggling to get all the fruit through, we'll just put it in the cold room and leave it again for a night. And then we could comfortably process, probably in Clare, we could comfortably process about 80 tonne a day. So, that's with the night shift as well. Yeah, so it's quite a big facility.
Right. I want to talk about alternate varieties with you. You've alluded to it, and I think it's something that may be of interest to you. What else is going on in this Adelaide Hills property? You've got Gruner, as we've discussed. You did Nebbiolo, and then you've hinted at Gamay. What's your thoughts on alternate and emerging varieties in Australia in general? I mean, I've had this discussion with everyone thus far. I've got guys in Tassie suggesting that cool climate Syrah could be the next thing to come out of there. We've got the guys up in the Barossa going, bloody hell, let's get some Italian gear in just because of the climate change. What's your thoughts on that? And what are you doing at Adelaide Hills?
Yeah, so I guess my general thought on emerging varieties and new varieties is just give it a go. Like if you can, why not? Just trialing new things, only small batches, and if it doesn't work, you can always graft it again to something that will work. We in the Adelaide Hills, I guess we're really conscious of the impact of climate change. We are getting drier years, hotter years, and a more compact growing season. So we're looking for things that stretch out their ripening period. A Nebbiolo, for example. I think Nebbiolo is an absolute favourite of mine. I love the wines coming out of Piedmont. They're such a versatile variety, and I think the Adelaide Hills Nebbiolos that you see, that they range from those juicier styles with a real serious tannin to those more savoury, secondary wines that have just got life for 40 odd years. So I think things like Nebbiolo are going to do really well in these warmer years, and they are our absolute last pick. We pick Shiraz, and then we pick Nebbiolo sort of 3 weeks later.
Sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry, I just missed you there.
No, you're back. They're back. I think you got a bit of a delay there. It's all right. No, I interrupted. Sorry, I was saying carry on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess in terms of the new things that we're also trialling, we've got Gamay going in, Pinot Meunier, just a couple bits and pieces. And we've also got Dolcetto, which we make into a rosé because it's quite large berries. We are able to sort of push it in the press and get a really beautiful light colour, blend a little bit of Pinot Noir back to it, and that gives us the complexity in that rosé.
So there's a fair bit of stuff going on there on the side at the moment. Yeah. And Gamay as a variety, is it just a trial batch, or is it slightly more than a trial run at the moment? Like, are we expecting a bottling soon?
Nah, this is just a trial for now. We'll, I don't think you'd see a Gamay from us for at least sort of 3 years. And same with the Pinot Meunier. We're really liking some of the examples of Australian red, dry red Pinot Meunier. And I think it's quite suited to the Adelaide Hills. And the other thing is, if you aren't happy with how it's progressing while it's a young vine, you can always use it in your sparkling as sort of that fleshy component. So.
Okay, let's talk about
what I guess is on the.
Got a bit of delay, Andrew. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Have you got me now? There we go. Right, you're back. You're back. I was going to say, if you weren't in wine, where would you be? What would you be doing?
Well, I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I did used to do a bit of landscaping, and I think, I really enjoy looking at a garden and loving the retaining walls and sort of geek out a little bit on that. So I think I'd be a landscaper with maybe a combi van that I could just drive around Australia and do landscaping for cash.
Landscaping for cash. It's a good name for a business. And tell us your favourite wine memory. It doesn't have to be a Pike and Joyce memory, or what's your favourite wine memory that you're allowed to share with us?
I was in
there as well.
Yeah. I reckon when I was in Germany, my first vintage, my first night, I got off the plane. I went straight into work. We worked for about 10 hours, and then after work, the winemaker said, "Now we're going to the Wurstmarkt," and I had no idea what it was. It's the world's biggest sausage and wine festival, and we went there, and he shoved a 500 ml glass called a Doppelglas in my hand, and this wine it's a 1 part sparkling Riesling and 2 parts dry Riesling. So that first Scholler, as it's called, set me up for the rest of vintage. And that's
how often did you have to do that?
My fondest memory of wine. Well, that was just once a night for the first week.
God. And Andrew, when you're driving around between Adelaide Hills and the Clare Valley, what's on the radio in the car? What are you listening to?
A Perfect Circle, their latest album, that Eat the Elephant is probably on repeat the most, and then I always keep going back to Red Hot Chili Peppers when I can't be bothered thinking too much.
Right. So this sounds like you're a fan of Maynard, if you listen to Perfect Circle.
Yeah.
I was saying, you may know, and I keep referencing him because it's stuck in my head. Rob Mack from Aphelion in McLaren Vale. When he judges with us, he's listening to Tool, and when he's working in the winery, he's listening to, as he calls it, stoner rock. So it was him that prompted me into this whole musical questioning. So the guys I was talking to yesterday was Credence and Johnny Cash. So it's good to get it up to more modern, but interesting stuff. Let's put a wrap on it, Andrew. People can jump onto pikeandjoyce.com.au to buy wines online. What else is on the website? Is there a membership, or is there a cellar door club offering that you know of?
Yeah. There's a 593 club, which is our cellar door exclusive club. So if you jump on there, and the guys in the cellar door will look after you, make sure you're up to date with all the new releases, and give you a nice little discount whenever you buy.
Fantastic. Excellent. So you heard it right from the horse's mouth. Pikeandjoyce.com.au, everyone, get on there. I think the Sav is still some stock available, hopefully. But get on there, have a look at everything, put a case together or a couple of mixed cases of wine together. You won't regret it. Great wines, great people. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us from the Clare today. You've only got another hour and a bit to go, and then it's beer o'clock. Actually, it is an hour to go. It's beer o'clock. So I hope you stay cool, and regards to all the team. Have a great Christmas, and thanks for your time.
Beauty. Thanks, Ross.
All right, everyone, that's it for this episode. Stay tuned. We've got lots more in the pipeline. There's a couple of really cool interviews coming up later on today, and they'll obviously be online. Check out anzbws.com.au for results and for more information. Till next time, stay safe.